Welcome to the fifth session in the California Farm Food Safety e-learning series, and to the second session focused on production agricultural water. I'm Linda Harris, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. This e-learning series is intended to provide information about agricultural water that is used during the production of produce. The series is tailored to Californians with specific production agricultural water regulatory and enforcement information relevant to California growers. The program has been funded by the California Department of Food and Agriculture Produce Safety Program. Several speakers will provide short presentations today during our 2-hour session, and then there will be some time dedicated to answering questions from the participants. As you will note, in this series, we actually postponed our first session, which was to have taken place May 6th. We're optimistic, obviously overly optimistic, that the proposed rule revisions for subpart E of the produce safety rule would have been published by that time. However, as you all know, that hasn't happened. So we've rescheduled that session to June 17th, and are hopeful still that we will be able to provide an update based on a published rule by that time. But I don't have any special knowledge that this will actually happen before then. We will, however, send out a notice to all of you to provide an update of the agenda for that session in advance of the June 17th date. The topics we chose to focus on for the session today and the one last week are those that we believed would be relevant to both the current and whatever modifications to subpart E are proposed. It's critically important that growers understand how to assess and address risks associated with their agricultural water systems, and that shouldn't change. And current options for treating agricultural water are also still going to be relevant no matter what the proposed rule turns out to be. So to avoid a little bit of confusion, and I have to figure that out to advance my slides. There we go. We have renumbered the sections so that they actually make sense. So here we are, instead of session 2, we're actually in session, instead of session 3, we're actually in session 2 today. So we are using Zoom as a platform for this series, and we'll be muting all the participants and encourage you to ask questions via the chat function. So at the end of all of the presentations, we will have a question and answer session that will be moderated, and we'll be drawing off of questions in that function. You can type in questions anytime during the program. We do ask that you keep your video off during the session and ask, put your questions in chat. Following the conclusion of the webinar, we will send you a link for a survey in Qualtrics, and we are hoping that you will take the time to complete the survey and provide us with some feedback. We will be recording each one of the training sessions, and those recordings are going to be made available at the UC Food Safety website. It may take us a little while to process the videos after recording, but we're going to send an email to all of the registrants when those recordings are available and include the link to the page on the website in that email. We actually already have the videos available for session 1, last week's session, which was on assessing risks associated with pre-harvest agricultural water systems. So what you will see that what we've done, that rather than just have one long video that was for the whole session, we've broken it down into 4 different shorter videos that run in length from about 14 to 43 minutes. And that'll allow you to pick and choose the topics you wish to review. The longer video shown here, that's 42 minutes, actually includes the question and answer session. So a link again to these videos is going to be provided in a follow-up email. So today's session is going to provide an overview of current options for treating pre-harvest agricultural water. Broadly, we're going to cover when you might want to treat water, what types of treatment options are available, some operational considerations, and then finish up with some updates on the CDFA produce safety program, specifically as it pertains to water treatments. We're going to be taking a short 5-minute break about halfway through the session. So I'm going to introduce all of our speakers now, and then we're just going to go through the program without further introduction. So let me introduce myself a little bit more completely. I'm Linda Harris. I'm a specialist in cooperative extension in the Department of Food Science and Technology here at UC Davis, and I'm a member of the UC Division of Agriculture and Natural Resources. I'm also a principal investigator with the Western Center for Food Safety. I have spent the past 22 plus decades studying foodborne pathogens in produce, from production agriculture all the way to consumer behavior and consumption. And I'll be giving an introduction to the topic today, as well as an overview of agricultural water. I'm absolutely thrilled to have the 3 water quality experts and extension educators joining me for today's program. Dr. Sandra Rock is a professor at the University of Arizona at the Department of Environmental Science, and also maintains a joint appointment as a water quality specialist with the University of Arizona Cooperative Extension. Dr. Rock's research focuses on microbial evaluation of water quality for the protection of public health, as well as promoting water reuse as a safe and practical resource for the Southwest. He was extensively involved in assisting the leafy greens industry in the 2018 E. coli investigation involving romaine lettuce grown in Yuma, Arizona. Additionally, she currently supports the California and Arizona leafy green marketing agreements by providing science-based recommendations for ag water treatment under the new irrigation water metrics. And today, Dr. Rock will address water treatment options. Dr. Faith Kritzer is an associate professor and produce safety extension specialist at Washington State University in the School of Food Science, and she's based at the Irrigated Agricultural Research and Extension Center in Prosser, Washington. Her extension program is focused on providing science-based recommendations and training to farms and packing houses so that they can develop robust food safety programs. Her research and extension is aligned as she seeks to fill knowledge gaps tied to bacterial foodborne pathogens in pre-harvest and post-harvest environments. And Dr. Kritzer will discuss treatment options and operational considerations for treating water on your farm. Dr. Don Stokel is senior environmental scientist, relatively recent, with the California Department of Food and Agriculture, specializing in water microbial quality. And he came to this role in 2021 after helping launch the Produce Safety Alliance Grower Training Program and other PSA efforts at Cornell University. Prior to working with Cornell Extension and Produce Safety Alliance, he was a research hydrologist with the U.S. Geological Survey Water Resources Division, where he was principal investigator on numerous fecal source tracking studies. Dr. Stokel will review CDFA's role in inspection with respect to the produce safety rule, with a focus on how inspectors approach an inspection and what they will be looking for from growers. So there are many sources and uses of agricultural water, and this particular section is based on understanding your options for treating agricultural water. Due to the safety risks that can be associated with agricultural water, the produce safety rule identifies this production input as a key area to focus to minimize food safety risks. And as it was for our first session, one of the learning objectives for today is an overall increase in confidently identifying agricultural water. Agricultural water in the context of the produce safety rule is narrowly defined, and it's important that growers focus on water that meets this definition for the food safety program. We will follow this discussion with a discussion of the current status for treating options and when it might be appropriate and not appropriate or possible or advisable to treat your water. And then we'll finish up with a discussion of the more practical realities of treating water, including constraints and operational considerations. So before we start, I want to spend 2 slides or 3 slides reviewing the definition of agricultural water. I've taken some slides from the Produce Safety Alliance supplemental materials in order to cover this, and I've modified them in a couple of ways. But agricultural water must be of safe and adequate sanitary quality for its intended use. And there are a couple of key words in this definition. It's water that's used in covered activities on covered produce where water is intended to or is likely to contact covered produce or food contact surface. So I've used some examples here that I think illustrate the nuances in the definition of agricultural water. So in this case, we have citrus, and citrus is considered covered produce. It's within the produce safety rule. In the middle, we have drip irrigation, and water used for drip irrigation in the context of a tree fruit, where the drip irrigation system is well maintained, is not agricultural water because it's not intended to or likely to contact that harvestable portion of the crop. And on the right-hand side, where we have a micro sprinkler system, that would be considered agricultural water because it would be hard to deny that that water isn't intended to or likely to contact the harvestable portion. It's actively contacting the harvestable portion in that photo. However, if this grower were to modify the micro sprinklers such that the radius of the spray was significantly decreased or that the tree skirt was maintained at a higher level such that the fruit didn't make contact with the water, then that water could be, the situation could be shifted such that that micro sprinkler irrigation water would not be agricultural water. So you really have to look at the circumstance involved. In my second example here, continuing with tree crops, I've chosen pistachios, and in this case, again, pistachios are considered covered produce. Again, here we have an example of drip irrigation in the center. That would not be agricultural water. But the crop protection spray application, in this case, going up into the tree canopy, would be considered agricultural water if that crop protection application occurs at a time that there is product in the tree. So if it was applied immediately after harvest or at some other time, it might not be agricultural water. But in this particular case, you can see product in the tree. Yes, it is agricultural water. Now, if we look at the bottom where we're looking at micro sprinkler irrigation, actually on very young pistachio trees, and I put maybe here. For those particular trees, the answer would be no. For pistachios, it takes 5 to 7 years before a crop is harvested from trees. And so for that first few years, where you're not harvesting from those trees, any of the water that you're using on those trees to irrigate or apply crop protection sprays would not be agricultural water. But once you're into a season where you are going to harvest that crop, then again, the micro sprinkler, depending on how it was set up, might be agricultural water if it was fanning into the canopy and into the product. But in most cases in these systems, the trees are skirted higher, and the micro sprinkler is probably not going to be considered agricultural water. So this slide just adds a couple of other examples, and I've taken the next few slides from a training program called Bridging the Gaps: Approaches to Treating Water on Farm. This was a multi-state collaboration sponsored by USDA National Institute of Food and Ag Food Safety Outreach Program, and both Dr. Kritzer and Dr. Brock were involved in the development and or delivery of what is an 8-hour program that is either taught in person when we're not in a pandemic, or it has also been taught online. And I attended the online version of this workshop and highly recommend the program if you want additional information on this topic of water treatment. We will be sharing information on that program and how you might sign up for one of their classes following this session. But in addition to the examples that I already provided on agricultural water, things like fertigation, cooling, where you're applying water to cool the crop, or applying water for frost protection, these again would meet the definition of ag water if it was covered produce and if there was harvestable crop that was coming into contact with the water. So as mentioned previously, the water compliance dates have been extended for the section in the produce safety rule for agricultural water, so subsection E. And as mentioned earlier, we're still waiting for FDA to publish a new proposed rule. In the meantime, the water requirements are those that are currently stated in the rule. And in 2019, I remember distinctly thinking that these extension dates were a long way away. But in reality, they are just a few months around the corner. And the compliance dates as listed here are dates where the grower must have begun testing by that date. And what that means is that if you have a growing season, it goes from May to October, you would need testing during the 2021 growing season in order to have some of your testing results ready for that January 26, 2022 compliance date. Again, we won't know what the proposed rule is going to say, in particular, as to say about these compliance dates. So stay tuned. But as things go further on, this is, I think, obviously causing some issues for some growers who haven't yet started testing. So again, agricultural water must be safe and adequate sanitary quality for its intended use. There are several things that you can do to ensure that water quality is safe and adequate. You can, as we talked about last time, do an overall risk assessment of your water system. But water testing is another part of what you can do to quantitatively evaluate the microbial quality of the water. And so the rule covers developing a microbial water quality profile that can help you understand various aspects of your water quality. So within that context, there are requirements for testing water sources that shift with the anticipated risk associated with that water source. So I've listed them here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about them because that's not the focus of what we're talking about today, but you can see that public water supply doesn't actually require your own testing. It could be a copy of test results. Groundwater has a lower frequency of testing than surface water would require. Now, those water tests currently are for generic E. coli, and the standards, or the criteria that have been set for those generic E. coli counts are 126 or less colony-forming units as a geometric mean, and 410 or less generic E. coli per 100 mils of water, statistical threshold value. So the geometric mean is a log scale average, which kind of represents a typical value, and the statistical threshold value is a measure of variability. Both of these are discussed in various resources that we will provide links following the end of this session. There are several tools that can help you interpret, can help you calculate those, and they're on our website, and as I said, we'll share them with you later. The reason why I introduced all of that is because if your water exceeds either the geometric mean or the statistical threshold value, there are a few options for you to use that water as in contact, as agricultural water, in contact with covered produce. One of them is a time interval that includes an anticipated die-off of pathogens of a half log per day for up to 4 consecutive days, or a scientifically valid die-off rate that takes into account the time interval between harvest and the end of storage of the product. And that might include reductions during activities such as commercial washing in a packing house. Another is inspection of the whole system, identification of the problem, assuming you can identify the problem, implementing a change, and then confirmation of the effectiveness of that change. And then finally, getting to today's topic, another option is to treat the water. And so that's how we got to today. Before I pass on the baton to my colleagues, I just wanted to bring up one specific example that pertains to California and to Arizona, but it is in the Leafy Greens marketing agreement. So just to be clear, this is not the produce safety rule. This is a separate document, a separate guidance for the Leafy Greens industry. But they have introduced a section, some metrics for application of treated water. And so I wanted to bring that up just for everybody to be aware. We won't spend a lot of time talking about it, but it does pertain to treating water. So in their document, also available online, also will be shared with you a link to this document. They define type A water as water that's unlikely to contain indicator organisms like generic E. coli. So indicators of fecal contamination. And these would be things like closed systems, a functioning well, municipal water, purple valve water, which is tertiary treated and disinfected recycled water. And then type B water is everything that's not a type A water. And so that's sort of the two waters. The reason that that's important is that they have gone on to say, if you have overhead applications, either for irrigation or chemical application for leafy greens, and it's greater than 20 days before your scheduled harvest date, you can use either type A or type B water. You can also use it for things like germination or ground chemigation, drip irrigation, furrow irrigation, dust abatement, and for cleaning non-food contact farm equipment. But if you are applying this water less than or equal to 10 days from the scheduled harvest, you must use either type A water or treated type B water. And so this is an example of a specific call out to using treated water within a certain time frame of harvest on a specific crop, in this case, leafy greens. So with that as an overall introduction,